So while I'm sitting around doing nothing, I thought we'd take the opportunity to do some more mailbag. So here we go. So the first question comes from A Marks. Hi, thanks for the information, very useful. Does humidity affect synthesizers, both new and vintage? I think we need to sort of like take another slight side step on that. Really, it's all to do with analog versus digital, as opposed to new versus vintage. So, if you look at electrical components, typically the electrical components will have a rating, whatever they are, and it will say something along the lines of, I don't know, resistance is 1K within a temperature range of X to Y. Okay, and what that basically means is that's the working range of that particular piece. And if the working range of the temperature goes outside either of those, then the resistance characteristics of that component would change. So anywhere you've got that's using any sort of analog circuitry where it's very heavily dependent on the way the circuit is designed and the components that are in that circuit, heat and humidity and moisture will all have a role to play in the characteristics of how that circuit will behave. So if you're playing in a very hot venue, then typically the board of the circuitry will be hot and therefore probably be working at the upper range of the components within it. Excuse me. If you exceed the upper range of the components, then the circuit's going to behave in a different way, and you get things like detuning going on. Now, you might turn around and say, well, moisture obviously has a place to play. Yes, again, moisture can change the way a circuit behaves. It can also short-circuit a circuit. So tracks can be shorted by moisture effectively landing on the track itself, or on pins, or on, you get the drift. And that moisture can be a number of places. It can be condensation, it can be general atmospheric moisture, whatever it happens to be. I've seen it on digital synths. So digital synths are not really susceptible to this sort of temperature fluctuation because of the way the circuitry is constructed, but they still do suffer. If you've got something that is expecting a working range of X and Y and it's above or below one of those working ranges, then the characteristics of that piece of the circuitry can change, which will also modify the synth itself. But most of the voice generation and the logic behind that is digital, and that doesn't tend to get affected. The places where I've seen moisture really, really bad on a modern digital synth is where you've taken a synthesizer from, say, your storage, or you've had it in a hard case or something like that, and you take it out and you put it on the stand, and it's a very humid environment. The unit itself is cold, the outside area is very hot and moist, therefore you get condensation. That can cause a real problem because that tends to short circuit the tracks. What I would suggest, if I'm honest, is if you're in that sort of scenario and playing in that sort of scenario, get the keyboard out, stick it on the stand, and leave it for an hour so it can acclimatise, and any moisture that gets involved on the board will eventually just evaporate again. Otherwise, I think you run the risk of having some sort of fairly significant damage, or potentially such fairly significant damage. So I think you have to sort of really look at, is it an old legacy or a vintage, whereas some of the new modern analog synthesizers can be affected by the same thing. It's really, how is the circuitry constructed, which will really sort of generate whether you've got a problem in terms of moisture, heat, etc. The next one comes from my good friend Bruce. To clarify in another way, I understand your project is an effort to make a flexible transfer procedure for usable floppy stored sound pads from floppy to PC hard drive, and reusable back from the PC to the T1 as an upload and to the T-run rather than becoming just a controller. Do I understand that correctly? Yeah, the project itself is, I think I said it in the rant last week, was I've got this PC, and the whole idea of this PC, which is an XP PC, yes, I know we're all up on Windows 10, but I need an XP PC, is to be able to actually duplicate the discs, and the discs, and it's purely an archive type thing is really what I'm trying to achieve with this at the moment, is trying to archive these discs in such a way that I've got them for future use on the keyboard. The problem with this legacy stuff is time is marching on, technology is marching on, and if we're not careful, we lose sight of all the good stuff that was done in the past, and it gets lost because the media gets damaged. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to avoid the media getting damaged, and being able to effectively maintain the libraries of this stock stuff. I am actually building up quite a library of stock sounds for the D50, the DX7, the M1, the T1, etc. So I'm probably at some point I will sort of publish a list of what stock sounds I have, just so you can see how big a library that library is becoming, and then we'll decide what we're going to do with it from there on. But we shall see. But that's the whole gambit behind buying the XP PC is to try and archive some of this stuff before the media gives out. So the next one comes from Richard, and this was in response to a video I did where I've gone and bought the adjustable stands from Roland. So you basically put the synth in, it flats down. It's the same stand you actually get when you buy the TR808 and the TR909. When you buy those, sorry, TR08 and TR909, sorry. But when you buy those, it comes in like a collapsible stand, and it sort of goes like that. But when you buy the other boutique synthesizers, you don't get stand. So I'd gone and bought the proper Roland collapsible stand for my other boutique synths. Plus the fact it actually is a good way to keep things stored. Anyway, the comment was, great video, did you also know Roland actually made wood cheeks for the boutique line? Actually, I didn't. I have a set, but they disappeared fairly quickly, and it's like a myth now, or a unicorn. Why does Roland do this to us? Good question. Why does Roland do a lot of things, I think is the answer to that one. But the diplomatic answer, I suspect that this was Roland dipping their toe in the water to see if there was actually any demand out there in the user community for wood end cheeks. I suspect that they didn't actually give it enough time to get going, given that they probably did this in the early days of boutique, and now here we are after however many releases of the boutique platform, and there's probably a greater demand in the market, and of course they've already bought the product. There is a guy actually in the UK that makes wood ends for boutiques, and he makes them in 1, 2 and 3. So 3 is dumph, dumph, dumph. And they're actually nice pieces of furniture. Actually, you can have them quite merrily stood on top of a counter or something with all the cables down the back. And he's also thought about the cable management as well, which is quite good. I suspect that he will be overcome by somebody doing this in a mass market way and importing cheap imports from the Far East of inferior quality. Personally, I would turn around and say, if you want wood end cheeks, give a craftsman the money. If you can't find his website, ping me. I'll give you his website, because I do believe in he's come up with a good idea, and therefore we should probably support him rather than go for the cheap imports. Especially as they're all handcrafted, and that's the right thing to do. Anyway, so I didn't know that. Now, the undiplomatic answer to this one is, I suspect there is going to be a number of things that are going to change within the Roland Corporation over the coming few years, because the main technical drive, shall we say, has left the company, or is leaving the company, and has given up his seat on the board and is being replaced. It's one of the reasons why I think the JP80 has been discontinued as their flagship synthesizer, and at the moment Roland don't seem to have a flagship synthesizer of the same caliber anywhere in the pipeline, or anywhere in the pipeline that anybody has actually commented on the internet. yes, there's the System 8, and we've just seen the patch for the System 8 come out, actually, funny enough. 1.20 has just come out. That's a good 18 months, 2 years since the last patch for the System 8 has come out, so at least we seem to be getting some support on that platform. But there's a System 8, and then there's the JDXI, the JD range of synthesizers, but there's nothing of the JP80 in that product line, and I don't see anything coming that way for quite a while. So if you're looking for the big synthesizers, it's not going to be a Roland, I think, going forward. So the next one comes from Keith, and again this was in response to a video I did where I put up a book and said I've got a copy of the Alexander Publishing Roland U20 user manual. And Keith writes, any idea where I can find that U20 book by Alexander Publishing? Here in the year 2018, the official manual is absolute garbage. Well, I'm sorry, I have absolutely no idea. I've been searching for certain books by Alexander Publishing for quite a while. They did a whole range of books on the M1, the T1, the U20. I think they did. U20. I think they did some books on the D10 and the D20 and the D50, and they are becoming like gold dust. Probably because they weren't actually particularly well. It wasn't like a hardcover and glossy book. It was sort of like this buff book, and I wonder whether a lot of people have just thrown them away, thinking that they're, the person who originally bought the book has moved on, and people think it's some sort of work manual or something, because that's the sort of format it is, if you know what I mean. It's that sort of, in-house, looks like an in-house bound document. But they are becoming like gold dust, and I've been hunting around for certain books on these keyboards for a long time. And I don't know whether I found this one on eBay or whether I found it on Reverb, but it was one of those platforms that it came up on. Now, I also agree with you that the official manuals for the synthesizers around that time could have been written in hieroglyphs for how useful they were. They sort of described the basic functions of some of the keys, and that was sort of okay, but when you try to actually make it do something, the basics weren't enough. You really wanted an in-depth explanation of how you do this. That's probably where YouTube comes in. YouTube is a sort of great place to put instructional videos like that, which is sort of the other side of the channel, if you like. But yeah, they are pretty useless. I think they were in a lot of instances. I think these manuals have been literally word for word almost converted from Japanese, which is part why they seem a little bit unintelligible. I'm sure if I could read Japanese, it would be far more intelligible to me than the English version. Which reminds me, I'm still trying to look for a T1 TX1P manual that's in English. That's causing me no end of fun. Anyway, the other side of this, of course, is I don't know whether we can start petitioning Alexander Publishing, whether we can get a groundswell of individuals that would buy PDFs. If Alexander Publishing republished these books as PDF with a nominal charge on them, I don't know, $10 or something, whether people would actually go and buy them, so we could persuade Alexander Publishing to relaunch these books in a digital format and allow us musicians to get hold of them for these legacy pieces of equipment. I don't know. How do you feel? Drop me a line. Again, from my friend Bruce. The discontinuation of the Korg OASYS is now less of a mystery. I'd be interested to see your communication with Korg support. Well, Bruce, I'm happy to report that the Korg OASYS has been restored to root health, and it has had all the upgrades to the actual keyboard done. It's now up on 1.3.3a, and also all the sound engines are now activated. So there's still a few things to do on the box, but in terms of software upgrades, I think we're there. So yes, it was a very interesting exchange with Korg support. It wasn't a very long exchange with Korg support, I might add, but it was a very interesting exchange with Korg support, who were very, very, very quick to point me in the right direction. I probably should go back to the user group now and just say that this is not the inference is not strictly correct, but some of the other things they say in the article are actually spot on in terms of you can't get your public ID until you've upgraded. But yeah, it's rude help. It's sitting at home waiting for me to play it. The next one is from Neo Luddite, and honestly that is the name on the account here. What's wrong with plugging in a USB hub? Okay, this is in response to a video I did quite a while ago now, called USB PowerGernomics. And what the videos were trying to get across, I did a couple of them, was that on a computer or any device that has power on it, typically there's only so much power on a USB port. So USB ports are typically designed to run at 5.2 volts, 5 to 5.2 volts, and then a certain ampage, which is normally quoted in milliamps. So I think the most powerful ones run at about 1,000 milliamps for an amp, whereas the sort of typical computer USB ports will run at something like 500 or 600 milliamps, which is 0.5 or 0.6 of an amp. Now, my point was that with the boutique equipment, a boutique synthesizer is rated at 0.5 milliamp. So if you've got one port and one boutique, effectively that's that port taken up. It can't power anything else if you need something else to be powered by the port itself. If the piece of equipment has its own power supply, that's a different kettle of fish. But if it needs to be powered by the port, there's only so much power that a USB port will give out. And definitely that's the USB 2 specification. I think the 3 specification gives more power. But I'm not looking at a 3 specification at the moment, so I'm just doing this from memory. And what he's saying, well, what about putting a USB hub in? Yes, you can put a powered hub in, and I think I did make that point in one of the videos, that you can put a powered hub in, and it would alleviate the problem, because the powered hub itself could supply, I think my powered hubs supply about 5 amps, so that's 5,000 milliamps, so you can do a hell of a lot more with them. But my point is that if you're trying to power everything with a computer and be a portable studio, there is only so much power. And the other thing you've really got to look for on a computer is you may have 2 or 3 or 4 USB ports on that computer, but they'll all be powered from the same USB bus, which means they all receive the same 5 volt, or the 5 volt 0.5 milliamp is split across all 4 ports. You don't get an independent supply on all of them. You have to be very careful about that. I've seen people come across on that before, thinking that they've got 4 ports at 0.5 milliamp each. In actual fact, they've got 4 ports sharing 0.5 milliamp. So that was my point I was trying to get across with the PowerGernomics is look at your computer, look at what the outputs of your USB ports are, and then look at what you're trying to power with the USB port, so that you don't actually overpower things or underpower things. If you see what I'm saying. I think this one's the last one for this section. Sergey writes, thanks for the video, really useful info. Some switch caps on my T1 are broken, but for the life of me I can't find anyone selling these on this side of the pond. Can I ask where you managed to source them? I think I've said before in some of these videos that sourcing parts for legacy synths is becoming much harder and harder and harder. With the T series, if you bought a T2 or a T3, they're exactly the same switch caps that are on the M series. So basically anyone who's breaking an M or a T, or T2 or T3 can supply you with caps. Alternatively, what would really be good is if we could find somebody in the market space who's willing to do a limited production run of these switch caps. That would be really good. Does anyone know anyone out there that has the ability, not necessarily 3D printing, because that's quite expensive, but actually somebody who knows somebody in the injection molding business who could actually, recreate the synth caps and do a, I don't know, 10,000 unit run or something, and then these could be put on the market. I think in this instance, I actually purchased my caps from Cintor, and I sort of I bit the bullet and paid because they are quite expensive in terms of shipping, but I paid their shipping costs because I needed them, and I was also, like you, I was struggling to find somewhere that does these caps. As I say, the T1 is different. The T1 has the long bars, whereas the T2 and the T3 have the little round ones. But honestly, if somebody out there has some sort of injection moulding facility that we could actually knock up some caps for these legacy synthesizers, because we've got the same on some of the other synthesizers like the Yamahas and the Roland stuff. All these things eventually get broken purely because people tend to push the buttons really hard. But if you have got an injection moulding facility and you're willing to run up a limited batch of these things, then I'm quite willing to promote you on my channel, so that you get orders come your way. So get in touch.
So this is the point in the video where I turn around to you and say, if you enjoyed the contents of this video, please give it a thumbs up. It allows other people to find this content more easily that you have enjoyed. I'm sure by now, if you didn't like the content of the video, you've probably given me a thumbs down, but I'd prefer if you didn't. If you'd like to be notified about when I post additional content to this channel, somewhere about here should be the subscription icon. So please click on there and subscribe to the channel. Over here should be other content that you may enjoy that I've already done or posted to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again.